Well, God bless you. God bless you. Thank you so very much, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being a part of the broadcast. Thank you for being here this Sunday morning as we celebrate another day, another opportunity to collect and come together and be a part of this journey, this wonderful journey that we are sharing one with another, journeying together into the kingdom and through the kingdom for that matter. This is a kingdom experience that we are engaging, and I just want to encourage all of us to continue to stay the course and be diligent and vigilant about your walk. Be intentional about your walk. Do things with intent and purpose. Do it without apology. Okay. Engage, lean into your relationship with God, with mother, and with father. Lean into that relationship because that relationship is going to and is bearing fruit in your life. It is allowing you to learn things that you have been previously ignorant of. It is allowing you to embrace those things in a more impactful way in your life. Because I know I'm experiencing those things myself. I'm experiencing those things from where from my journey. And so I just want to encourage all of us as we journey together, as we embrace this journey and this awakening in the kingdom. Regarding our identity. So again, I just wanted to just encourage all of us this morning. I want to start by inviting all of you to say, share your thoughts and your comments. Please feel free to share your thoughts and comments on the topics that we discuss on the broadcast. That's important to me because it gives me an opportunity to get some feedback from you in real time, how you are receiving these things and your thoughts about them. And in addition to how, you feel about it, it is allowing us to dialogue about these things. Because I come to you from this side of the microphone sharing what God has given me. That doesn't mean that this is for everyone, okay? But what it does mean is that this is from God. Now, what you do with it will depend on what God is doing with you, what God is speaking to you, and vice versa. What you're sharing and what you share with me depend. What I do with it depends on what God is doing with me. So I just want to encourage all of us to share with one another, and this platform, a no judgment zone at all. I mean, we may disagree, but we won't judge each other in the sense of the way we're talking about judgment nowadays. Okay. But we may disagree with one another, and I'm okay with disagreement. I'm okay with you not agreeing with what I said, but let's dialogue about it. Let's talk about it, because I promise you that if it's coming from God, we will find a common place of understanding. And I do believe that it's coming from God. And I believe the things you disagree about are coming from a place of your engagement with God as well. So again, I just want to encourage all of us to share your thoughts, your comments and ideas about the things that I'm sharing. And the things that I'm sharing may spur some thoughts and ideas, and you share that as well. I'm good with that. Okay. So thank you so very much, everyone, for just sharing your input and engaging with us here on Kingdom Voice. As we get ready to get started, lastly, I want to say, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. You can do so at my email account at lcbellany, and that's BELONEY lcbellany@yahoo.com. Okay, feel free to reach out to me there, and there I can exchange and share, my other contacts that you can connect with me on, and I'd love to do that with you. For those of you that are on WhatsApp, that platform, which I use a lot for business, quite a bit, because I communicate internationally, and WhatsApp allows you to do that across the globe, just as if you're sending a text message, to someone down the street or in the next room to you. WhatsApp allows you to really connect with people across the globe, domestically and foreign. And if you'd like to reach out to me on WhatsApp, you can do so there as well. And we can determine that and discuss that. Should you reach out to me directly, we can share that information with you. Okay, so let's get started this morning. I am, to say the least, tremendously concerned about the topic that we're going to talk about today, and that is that we're destroying our children and our future if we do not course correct here. Okay, we are in an active engagement effort that is destroying our children. Now, I don't for 1 minute think that we want to do it, but the enemy is subtle enough to get you to do something that you don't want to do, while all at the same time encouraging you to do it with vim, vigor, and vitality. Isn't that amazing? The enemy can get you to do something that you otherwise would not do. Kind of like, you remember when we were young, for those of us that are up in age, when our parents used to get us to take that annual spring cleaning medication that we used to take, that castor oil. Oh my gosh, it brings back horrible memories at 64 years of age. We used to take that medicine. That medicine was so disgusting that they would have to hide it in juice, if you remember that correctly. Y'all remember? They would have to hide that medicine in juice to get us to take it because it was so repugnant, so disgusting. But it was something that they needed us to take. Well, the enemy will do something very similar. He will hide his intention, or the enemy will hide their intentions in something that is good and tasteful and get us to drink it or to consume it with enthusiasm, while all at the same time it is destroying something very precious to us. And in this particular case, it's our children. And so today I want to talk to us about something that is trending in our society today, and we all know it as what they call gender affirming care. I want to talk about that for the next few minutes. I want to discuss that because I know many of you have either heard it, read it, but never taken the time to explore it, investigate it, and understand what exactly is GAC, or gender affirming care, where it comes from, why we even need what they are now calling gender affirming care. And so I want to talk about that, give you a sense of awareness, because when I make you aware, or when you become aware of something, you begin to see it. Kind of like when we were, when you buy a brand new car, all of a sudden you start seeing those cars running all over everywhere. It's not that those cars just suddenly appeared. No, it's just that you have become aware of it and now you're noticing it. Same here. If I can make you aware of this idea and subject of gender affirming care, what it is, where it came from, what it's doing, those types of things, you will begin to recognize it and address it as necessary per your assignment and mandate from God. And that's what I want to do today. I want to talk about this whole subject matter of gender dysphoria, gender affirming care, the arguments for it and the arguments against it, and the kingdom argument against that. Okay. And let me set the record straight. First and foremost, I am not here as an apologist for gender affirming care. I'm here as an opponent of gender affirming care, and especially the way that it is being promoted in our society today. Okay. And I'm going to draw a distinction between gender dysphoria and then gender affirming care. And I hope you grab that. Gender dysphoria and then gender affirming care are not necessarily synonymous. Well, they're certainly not synonymous, because one is the condition, the other one is the remedy. Okay, so they're certainly not synonymous, but they're also not necessarily I don't know what the right word for it is, but the way that we are doing gender affirming care does not necessarily line up with gender dysphoria. Okay, that's what I was trying to get at for at the moment. So anyway, so I want to talk about this subject, and let's start with what it all begins with. Okay. So I want to share with you a couple of scriptures that I'd like for you to take note of. Okay, so everything that I'm going to talk about is going to be based on a kingdom perspective. Okay, a kingdom perspective. Now, when I say kingdom, I don't mean biblical. So let's make that clear. When I use the term kingdom, I am not using a term that is synonymous with biblical. There are biblical references. There are biblical implications as it pertains to the kingdom, but the kingdom is far broader, vaster, more expansive than the biblical narrative that many of us are familiar with. Okay, so I want to make that clear. So everything I'm going to talk about today is going to come from a kingdom perspective. So again, that will go beyond the biblical narrative that we're familiar with. So let's start with that. So we're destroying our children and our future. 2 Kings chapter 16, verse 3 says this: "But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, yea, and made his sons to pass through the fire according to the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel." In essence, when the children of Israel went into the promised land, God cast out the heathens, whom the heathens had a general practice of making their children walk through the fire. And now all of a sudden, one of the kings of Israel decided to adopt the behavior of the heathens and began to make his children walk through the fire. And God saw that as an abomination. 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 3 says this: "Moreover, he burnt incense in the valley of the son of Hinnom, and burnt his children in the fire, after the abomination of the heathens, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel." Probably a reference to the same issue as 2 Kings. But nonetheless, God calls it an abomination. God speaks of what they did to their children is as an abomination. I want to say the same and call the same alarm and raise the same alarm as well. What we are doing to our children is an abomination. This idea of gender affirming care that we have began to perpetrate against our children, and I use the term perpetrate intentionally because I believe it is being intentionally done. Okay. And I'm going to explain to you why I think it's intentional and why I think the enemy has done something to make unsuspecting people do something that they think is beneficial, but in the end, it is destructive, and they are intentionally doing it, albeit not necessarily for the destructive reason, but that is the ultimate outcome in the end, that it is destructive. Okay. So I wanted to lay the foundation for what we're going to talk about moving forward from a kingdom perspective, using 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles as a point of emphasis to say to all of us that God sees this as an abomination. And I don't say that because of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. I say that because that is what I have received of the Lord. of father and of mother. And I'm just simply using Second Kings and Second Chronicles as a point of reference that I think all of us can relate to. Okay. So what is gender? What is dysphoria? Let's talk about that. So you hear the term gender dysphoria, but let's start with the basic premise of dysphoria. Dysphoria is a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction with life. That's what dysphoria is. So when we start talking about gender dysphoria, we're basically talking about a dissatisfaction with the gender that I have been that I was born with. Okay. Dysphoria is a dissatisfaction with the gender that I've been born with. So the clinical definition of gender dysphoria is this: it is a clinical significant distress caused by a mismatch between a person's inner gender identity and their assigned birth sex. So in essence, someone is born as a particular sex, and their inner identity as it relates to that sex is disconnected, and thus they begin to feel distress and experience disappointment and dissatisfaction with that relationship between their inner identity and their natural their birth gender. Okay. Now let's talk about gender for a minute. Many people will begin to say that gender is fluid, meaning whatever I say my gender is, that's what my gender is. Poppycock, hogwash, garbage. My gender, we have already established that there is male and female. I'm going to talk about that from a kingdom perspective in just a minute. But we've already established that there is male and female. Okay. And so now, in an attempt to make the argument that many people want to make, they now begin to blur, or if you will, distort the understanding of male and female. So that's the first thing that they do, is that they have to convince you that male and female doesn't exist, and therefore they begin to tear down the traditional understanding of male and female, and so that they can enter in and project into or project their definition of gender into the conversation. I have to destroy what's there in order to introduce what I want to introduce, and that's what they do. So gender dysphoria is a clinical significant distress caused by a mismatch between a person's inner gender identity, and the pivotal word here is inner gender identity. That gives fluidity to it, because what I identify as is of no consequence to you, because you don't control how I feel. And that is true. That is true. I can't control how you feel. That's why the definition has to become so subjective, okay, that there cannot be an objective standard. So when I begin to apply a subjective standard, if you will, or a subjective definition, then that definition becomes mine. I determine what a male and a female is, and so forth and so on. So now we don't have an objective standard by which to measure your identity, and thus you can begin to become whatever it is that you want to become. Gender identity and their assigned birth sex. Okay. This is the distortion that has been created to advance the narrative of gender dysphoria. Okay. Now we get to, so we understand what dysphoria is, gender dysphoria. Now we get into the controversial remedy for gender dysphoria, and that is what they now have called gender affirming care. Now, I want you to understand something. Gender affirming care has been adopted by the psychiatric community as a normative treatment for gender dysphoria. Let me say that again. Gender affirming care has been adopted by the psychiatric community as a normative treatment for gender dysphoria. And as a result of that, they're teaching this within the schools of psychology and within the practice of psychology. These things are being rapidly adopted. We're going to talk about the objection to it, but I want to be fair and honest with the definition, the understanding, the standard practices of gender affirming care, albeit I disagree with it. And I'll go on record being very open about the fact that I disagree with this. I think it's voodoo science. I think it's voodoo psychology, border on witchcraft, if you will, and certainly voodoo. And so I want to be very clear that this is something that I categorically disagree with, but I want to give you the understanding and the definition and the clear position that gender affirming care, gender dysphoria, and the psychiatric community has embraced regarding this. So when you start to talk about it and when you start to encounter it, remember, this is making you aware. So you're going to start to see it and hear it and recognize it as you go about your daily lives. As you encounter that, you'll be armed with at least an argument that is rooted in sound kingdom principle and also sound psychological opposition. All right. So gender affirming care is a provision of health services to support a person's process of living and being perceived in alignment with their own gender identity and expression. It is based on well-established endocrinology, psychology, and developmental science. Now, notice what they said. It is based in well-established endocrinology, psychology, and developmental science. This is what is being taught in the schools. Now, what they're not telling you is the opposite, and we're going to get into that in just a minute, the opposition. Because as one associate, and by the way, this is according to the Association of American Medical Colleges. Remember I told you this is what is being taught in schools? This is what is being promoted by the organization, the nonprofit that promotes the Association of American Medical Colleges. Okay? So when you go to the University of and the University of School of Psychology, this is what is being promoted in those schools. So you have educated people coming, academicians, and then clinicians coming out of these institutions armed with this information and this quote unquote research and study and academic norms that is promoting that within our society. And now we have to address this and become deal with this from a sociological and anthropological standpoint. Okay, we have to deal with these things from a sociological perspective. Okay, obviously sociological is more immediate, anthropological is kind of more historic, but you get my point. It includes, listen to what gender affirming care includes: puberty blockers. Now that is specifically targeting children because adults don't need puberty blockers. Okay. Hormone therapy. Now that's what adults need, hormone therapy, and supportive care that helps align a person's physical characteristics with their gender identity. Now, and again, I don't mean to be facetious. I don't mean to be condescending or anything, but listen to what it just said. Help aligns a person's physical characteristics. That means that that person is in fact has the physical characteristics of a female or a male. They have male or female genitalia. They have male or female bone structure. They have male or female hormones. They have male or female reproductive systems. All of the above is what is assigned that person has, whether they are male or female. Okay. And it seeks to align their identity, the way they see themselves, with the way they actually are. So in essence, a man, let's assume that he's a man, that he has all the physical, biological attributes of a male, but he sees himself as a female. He identifies with a female. Now, here is the irony of all of that. He knows he's a male. He knows he's in a masculine body, but he wants to be a female. He feels and believes that he should have been a female. Now, I need you to grasp that. It is clearly a psychological issue. No question about that. Hence the term gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is, in fact, a psychological condition. The problem that I have, and the problem that many people have, is the treatment for that. Okay, and we're going to get into that. Research shows it reduces depression, anxiety, and suicide attempts, and is considered medically necessary by major medical organizations. Now, I want to address something. There is legislation on the books that will allow an individual to be institutionalized if it can be proven that they are a threat to themselves or to others. I'm going to say that again. There is legislation that is on the books that will allow an individual to be institutionalized against their will if it can be proven that they are a physical threat to themselves or to others. They can be institutionalized and receive the necessary medical care, medical treatment. But now when it comes to gender dysphoria, all of a sudden now we indulge their delusions. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to give the opposition to it just yet, but forgive me. I got ahead of myself. So let me get back to the point of what this gender dysphoria is all about. Research shows it reduces depression, anxiety, and suicide attempts, and is considered medically necessary by major medical organizations. Again, major medical organizations being driven by the colleges and institutions from which these individuals come from, now has decided that, oh yeah, this is a thing. This is a thing. So we need to now deal with it as a thing. Okay. And here's how we're going to deal with it. Okay. It spans psychological support, social transition, medical intervention, and surgical intervention. So you have psychological, sociological, medicinal, and surgical. All of the above. I can, in essence, what they're saying that I can do, I can turn you from a man into a woman, or from a woman into a man. Psychologically, I make you think you're a woman. Sociologically, I make you make others believe that you're a woman. And then medically, I can give you all the treatment to give you breasts. Lower, if you're going from a man to a woman, give you breasts. Take the bass out of your voice. I can do all of those things medically, and surgically. I can give you a vagina. I can't give you a womb, but I can give you a vagina. I can give you, transform your appearance. So I can, in essence, indulge your full delusion. That's what they're saying. That's exactly what they're saying here. I can indulge your entire delusion and make society accept you for what your delusion says you are. Okay? That's what gender affirming care seeks to do. Never mind deal with the root cause of the problem. We want to indulge your dysphoria. Not only just indulge it, we want to encourage your dysphoria. This is what gender affirming care. So when you hear the term gender affirming care, just understand the scope, the breadth, the depth of this effort that they are putting forward. Okay. And this is why they say that it works. This is again the medical, the psychological, psychiatric community is putting forth that this works. This works. Again, coming from the institutional training, modern practice in many circles of this issue. Gender identity is a stable neurodevelopmental trait. Now, notice, now again, not gender, but gender identity is a stable neurodevelopmental trait, basically making gender fluid as it comes to one's identity of their gender, which means that if I'm a man and I think I'm a woman, then I'm a woman, according to modern psychology. Research shows gender identity forms early and is not simply a preference. When identity and physical development diverge, distress can occur, or gender dysphoria can occur. Okay, now, again, I'm doing my level best to give you their side of the argument before I start to give you my opposition. But it boggles my mind that people are just given over to the ability to indulge this delusion. But I digress. B, gender dysphoria is a recognized clinical condition. I don't deny that gender dysphoria is a condition. It's just like, for example, someone is born with 4 fingers on one hand. Let me be reasonable, because that happens a lot, right? Someone is born with 4 fingers on one hand, right? Or maybe they have 6 toes instead of 5, okay? We immediately recognize that as a physiological abnormality, period, full stop. Why? Because the vast majority, overwhelming majority of humans are born with 5 fingers on a hand. So we recognize the abnormality and then we seek to address it. If it is 6, sometimes, and as a matter of fact, I knew a young man that had 6 fingers, okay, when we were growing up. Okay, that was an abnormality. Now, we were poor and we didn't have the luxury of having surgically remove that finger. So he grew up with it, and we just all, we all just accepted that. But people of means typically opt for surgical removal of that 6th appendage. Why? Because it is abnormal. And so we seek to correct it. Not here. Not now. Modern psychology has indulged the delusion and the dysphoria and seeks to impose that delusion on society rather than addressing the problem, the abnormality. They have decided to impose that upon society and say, you're wrong for not accepting that. Number C, finishing. Gender dysphoria is a recognized clinical condition defined in the DSM by the American Psychiatric Association as psychological distress caused by incongruence between assigned sex and gender identity. I agree. There is definitely a disconnect between the assigned gender and the way the person sees themselves. But it doesn't make it right, and neither does it require me to accept it. See, medical interventions reduce distress. So now they've decided and concluded that if we can medically intervene, we can reduce that person's stress. Okay, fair enough. It decreases depression, reduces anxiety, and lowers suicide attempts. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I think gender affirming care in its literal definition, not in its practiced definition, but in its literal definition, is something we need to do. There is something wrong with these people. There is something abnormal about these people. It just happens to be psychological as opposed to physiological. There is something wrong. How do we deal with that? That's where gender affirming care. Now, the problem I have with gender affirming care is that I want to affirm your gender identity, not I want to address it or correct it. I want to affirm it. In essence, I want to align with. That's what affirmation means. It means to align with something. Okay? That means to agree with it. And that's what they want to do. They want to agree, the medical community to agree with the person's delusion about their gender rather than the reality about their gender. Instead of aligning the person's psychology with their gender, they want to align the person's gender with their psychology. And beloved, that's a non-starter. That is unsustainable at every level. But I digress again. So this is what gender affirming care is all. This is why they say it works and why they want to promote it and why they're promoting it in these colleges and universities. Okay. Before I get into the argument against gender affirming care, and in particular for adolescents, I want to deal with something that I think is sinister. And we're going to deal with that in just a minute in more detail. But I want to deal with what I think is more sinister around this issue of gender affirming care and gender dysphoria. And here's the sinister thing, the demonic thing behind it. I don't think it starts at the point of intervention by the psychiatric community. I think it starts way before that point of intervention. It starts at the place of grants, donations, foundations that are giving to these institutions. And I think the people that are funding these institutions by way of grants and donations and foundations and the like is where this idea festers and gains life. These people that are pulling the purse strings are the ones that are the real culprits behind this anti-kingdom mandate idea of gender affirming care. Remember, I'm not arguing with gender dysphoria. I do believe that there is such a thing as gender dysphoria. It is an abnormality of the psychology. It is a psychiatric abnormality that needs to be dealt with. Agreed. Okay? Agreed. But gender affirming care is the response, is the treatment of that condition that I vehemently, categorically disagree with. And I think you ought to as well. But I think it stems from a sinister place, a dark, sinister, demonic place of where the money enters the equation. And the money enters the equation way back where these schools, institutions, places of academic engagement are seeking funding for their psychiatric department, for their sociological department, and so forth and so on, that money introduced, but it comes with a condition. And that condition is that you teach these kinds of things. And I believe, and I absolutely am convinced that is where the poison, if you will, hits the pill. Okay, the poison enters the process way back there. And by the time it manifests, you have clinicians promoting this gender affirming care that is more diabolic than the money that started the process. Moving on. the argument against gender affirming care, and in particular for adolescents. Critics argue that the research supporting puberty blockers and hormones in adolescents is low to very low quality. Now, the critics are themselves clinicians and academics. So not everybody in the academic community supports this. Not everybody in the clinical community supports this. And they begin to argue, often observational. The research is observational without control groups and with short follow-up, meaning that there isn't a whole lot of data and a whole lot of time to evaluate the results, okay, to determine whether or not these practices are effective, or these treatments are effective. The Case Review, a UK study in 2024, the largest review of youth gender services, concluded that gender medicine for children is built on shaky foundations, finding that most guidelines were not strongly evidence-based, subjective. Okay? C, long-term safety and effectiveness is lacking. They don't know what the long-term safety concerns are, or the long-term effectiveness of this gender-affirming care. I want to call your attention to something right quick, and we're going to go on. Let's see how we're doing on time here. Yeah, give me another few minutes. You remember the COVID vaccine? How they said all of these things about the COVID vaccine. Now, this was scientific. They presented it as scientific fact. The media pushed it. The political parties that advocated for it pushed it, and on both sides. And now we are less than a decade beyond COVID, and we're already understanding that what they said to us was a lie. Not the untruth, not they intentionally said things to us to get us to believe something that they knew was not true. The classic clinical definition of a lie. That's what they did to us. Now we've got gender affirming care, and they're doing the exact same thing again. This time it's targeting our children. And I'm not here for it. I promise you I'm not. That's why I'm on this broadcast right now, this show, saying to you that gender affirming care, as they have been promoting it, is destructive for our children. If you're an adult and you want to go through that, listen, go do your thing. Go mutilate yourself. Go do whatever you want to do to yourself. But to deny the parental oversight of children, to say and to object to this, because in many states, parents are denied the right to object to this if the child has been convinced by someone else other than the parent that this is the condition and this is the treatment that you need. Puberty blockers as fully reversible. See, they're promoting, just like they said that the COVID vaccine was going to stop the virus. Then it was going to, when they realized it wasn't going to stop it, then they said it wasn't going to kill you. When they realized it wasn't going to kill you, then they said it was your best defense. They lied to us, and they are lying to us about these puberty blockers and these long-term safety and concerns, or the effectiveness itself of the gender affirming care that they are administering. They don't know the effectiveness. They don't know the detrimental effects or the safety concerns, and they certainly are lying to us about the fully reversible puberty impact of the puberty blockers. Because clinicians and scientists are coming out now and saying, we don't know whether or not these puberty blockers are fully reversible. Mental health and comorbidities. A comorbidity is the impact of on a different disease that you may already have, okay, that these puberty blockers may have on or the medications that they put you on may have an impact. They don't know the impact of these medications on different diseases that people may have. Okay, that's called a comorbidity. And so there is so much unknown, but because they want to push an agenda, they ignore that and they try to sell it to us as scientific fact, when in fact it's nothing more than scientific supposition, theory. And I'm not here for it. Systematic review and official reevaluations are objections that the clinical community is starting to raise about this. Now, I've been teaching and I've been sharing for the last couple of weeks from the political side of things, and this stuff tends to be divided down political lines. As a matter of fact, this administration has banned and has issued an executive order banning all gender affirming care targeting adolescents. And they're going back and forth in the courts about it, but all gender affirming care has been banned by an executive order by this administration, the Trump administration. And I am all for that, because we should not be causing our children to walk through the fire, sacrificing our children because we've been convinced of something that is at best voodoo, in my opinion. I don't deny gender dysphoria. I do argue vehemently with gender affirming care as it has been articulated by the clinical community that advocates for that. Okay, let's wrap it up. The kingdom argument against gender affirming care for adolescents, as gender affirming care has been defined by modern psychology, or the modern psychological clinical community. It contradicts the kingdom mandate, God's image and procreation. It contradicts God's mandate, the kingdom mandate. We are created in the image of God. God created us male and female because that is the image of God. The enemy comes in and distorts that image. Adam, who told you you were naked? I didn't. You remember that? Someone is telling you something other than what God has instilled in you. Now we have to get to the root of who's telling you, or what is it that they're telling you. Forget about who. What is it that they're telling you, and the truth in that. If there is no truth in what they're telling you, then we have to get rid of what they are saying to you. We have to dispel, combat. We have to confront what they're telling you to get the right information to you. But instead of doing that, we want to indulge what they're telling us. And we know what happened when we indulge what they're saying rather than combat what they're saying with what God has said about me. It contradicts the kingdom mandate. This is why I struggle with gender affirming care. It doesn't deal with the problem, the fallacy of what is being said to me. It indulges the delusion of what is being said to me. It indulges and encourages the delusional concept of one's gender. The patient is dictating the diagnosis. So now, instead of the clinician or the practitioner getting the patient to accept the truth, the practitioner is allowing the patient to dictate their response. That is insane in itself to me. that the practitioner is allowing the patient to dictate the care. Because instead of convincing the patient that they are delusional, the practitioner is indulging their delusion and treating their delusion. Unbelievable. Care should be given to restore the proper psychological and emotional alignment with one's genetic biology. The care should align my psychology with my reality, not align my reality with my psychology. Do you see what I'm saying? The psychologist, the psychiatrists should be aligning that person to their gender and treating that and treating it in that direction rather than the opposite, which is what is currently going on. To get ready to bring it to a close. Modern psychology has bowed to academic pressure. You heard me say this earlier, and I'll finish up on this. Modern psychology has bowed to academic pressure and not scientific research. Academic programs are pressuring and incentivizing professors to teach this as psychological norm, which is emanating from funding and grant sources. Let me explain that whole statement. The reason they are teaching this is because the people that are giving the grants and that are funding the research are saying, this is the outcome that we want to have. I'll give you the money if you guarantee me that outcome. They may not be saying it in those words, but that is the intent of what those discussions. I'll give you the money as long as you support this. And you know what they do? They take the money and then they alter the outcome. They make the outcome say whatever it is that money dictates. And that's what we have, beloved. That's what we have going on in what we are now affectionately calling gender affirming care, making it sound so compassionate, so concerned, when in reality it's destructive as hell. Destructive as hell itself. This is what we're dealing with. This is how we are dealing with this issue. And one of the things that I want to encourage you and help you to recognize is that when we start talking about this gender affirming care, don't be dissuaded or fooled or bamboozled by the wording. It's destructive, it's demonic, and it is destroying our children and our future as a country. As a society, let me not say as a country, as a society. Just and equal to abortion in its destructive nature, not necessarily in its overall impact, because abortion just destroys children at an unbelievable rate. Gender affirming care is more subtle and less destructive, but destructive nonetheless. Okay, an atomic bomb would be the equivalent of abortion, whereas, or rather, a nuclear bomb would be the equivalent of an abortion, and an atomic bomb would be the equivalent of gender affirming care. Now, one is less destructive than the other, but both of them are devastatingly destructive. And that's what I want to get you to understand and see. And I hope I've done so in today's broadcast. We are destroying our children and our future with this gender affirming care nonsense. And I'm going to call it that, nonsense. So, beloved, thank you so very much. I really hope that today's broadcast really helped you and enlightened you on this gender affirming care issue that is going on in our society today. I see we don't have any comments. I encourage you to share those thoughts and comments in future broadcasts. But But I really hope that this has brought to light some things that maybe you didn't know. And if you did know it, reinforce them in your opposition. Amen. 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 Well, listen, God bless you. Thank you so very much for joining us today here on Kingdom Voice. I'm asking that you join me again next Sunday right here at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time as we continue to share with you truths of the kingdom from an apostolic perspective. Until then, I ask you to be well, be blessed, and we'll see you again next Sunday.